Welcome to Not Fellowship. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Gordan Firemark, the podcast lawyer who I have been following for some time, and I'm really thrilled to be able to actually talk to him on live here. Um, he is an author, a podcaster, a lawyer, and also a teacher. So I thought he would be the perfect fit for Not Fellowship. Thank you very much for joining us, Gordon.
Well, hi, Valerie. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So I do a little bit something different than what usual. Tell me about your history.
Mm-hmm.
So if it throws you off balance, we can, do another way. But my usual first question is, what was your learning journey like? Some people do memories. Some people do kind of like when they started getting into different projects. Sometimes people go into their school journey and then into their private learning endeavors. So whatever
Sure.
makes you feel comfortable is fine to go with.
Well, I have a varied and storied, I guess, learning journey to share with you and your listeners. I obviously the traditional schooling kind of an approach to learning in the early days. Actually, one thing that just occurred to me as you were talking was I was in the third grade, and I was that kid who was, I guess, not to brag, but I was one of those kids that was considered the gifted and talented, and it was before they named those programs. But I was always sort of a little ahead of the class in terms of where things were, and that left me bored when waiting for the rest of the class to catch up. And I had one teacher who saw me fidgeting and saw me, talking to other students and doing things I wasn't supposed to be. This is third grade. She decides to call up my parents and tell them, I think he's hyperactive. He needs to be on Ritalin. Now, my father was a pediatric neuropsychopharmacologist. You don't go telling a pediatric neuropsychopharmacologist that his kid has a pediatric neuropsycho disease, and needs pharmacology, right? So my dad read this Teacher the Riot Act about me not, I know what that looks like. You're ridiculous. Don't ever presume to tell me, that kind of thing. Turns out I think she was probably right. But I went undiagnosed. I'm still undiagnosed. But anyway, so that was sort of the flavor of my learning journey through school, was always feeling a little bored and held down by the rest of the kids. And so I was underperforming in grade school and middle school and even through high school. But by the time I got to college, I was sort of in my element, and learning became a challenge and an experience that was worthwhile for me. And so, I did very well in college, and that led to going to law school and so on. But thinking about this and looking, at what we're going to be talking about today, I realized that along the way, I've always sort of had a teach myself approach to some things, hobbies and the avocations. I got into photography at a young age, and I really learned about cameras and lenses and depth of field and focus, focal length, and those things on my own from books and magazines. Likewise, getting into audio, and in high school, middle school and high school, I was the school audio technician, and I learned most of that really just from doing and seeing what other people were doing. But then video and technology and computers and blogging and design and podcasting, all of these things are things that I picked up along the way and sort of went about learning to do myself. And now I will brag a little bit. I think I'm pretty good at most of these things, considering that I never had any formal training in most of them. Yeah, I've always liked to learn new things and new skills and try to apply it to to my life and finding ways to make a living or have a more favorable experience of one thing or another. So yeah, I love it. And then teaching is another component of my life, as you mentioned. Over the years, I've done a lot of content marketing, which I consider a teaching, right? Sharing blog posts or podcast episodes about the legal stuff that I work with my clients, and it's great to show myself off as the expert and allow people to come my way and hire me. But also done some, formal teaching in the college environment and law school environments. And I find that very rewarding for a while. Then I get a little bored with it. Usually when the students are starting to tick me off. because they're not doing the work or they're not picking up the material the way I wish they would. And
Aw.
maybe that's me again feeling a little held down by the pace of things or something like that. But I do enjoy teaching, and I've been very fortunate to have opportunities to teach in my areas of expertise in my field. So all of that is sort of part of the learning journey. I think one of the best ways that anyone can learn a skill or a knowledge base is to teach it.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
So how did you start in as a lawyer, or did you start in the creative? How did the lawyer creative industry? I'm like, how did that come about?
Yeah. I discovered my passion for the performing arts at a very young age. And interestingly, not as a performer, but always as a sort of behind the scenes helper, facilitator, using my creative skills and energy to help the other stuff. So, when I was in kindergarten, age 5, I was in a school that was a K through 12 school, and the high school kids were doing their production of Oliver. And the kindergarten class got brought in for, among other classes, a dress rehearsal. And the moment the lights went down and the curtain went up and the sound and the lights came on and the orchestra started playing, I was hooked and I wanted to be a part of this kind of thing. And so that sort of followed me, well, into middle school. We'd moved across the country, and my parents were avid theater goers, so they took us as kids to see shows. But in middle school, I was getting into sort of low grade trouble with my classmates, the members of my Boy Scout and Cub Scout troop, and I would go out and get into low grade stuff. And somehow the principal of the school just decided, okay, that's the kid. And he grabbed me and pulled me aside one day. He said, I want you to run the lights for the school variety show. And then the next thing, it was the sound for the variety show. And that got me into the sound until in high school, I was the school sound guy for all the shows and the events and things. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I was working at a theme park for doing lights and sound, and also in the community theaters, and not the community, professional theaters around LA. So I thought that was going to be my career. I was going off to college to study theater. In the course of that, that was at the University of Oregon. Theater was a very performance-oriented program. That wasn't what I wanted to be doing, so I switched over, eventually landed in radio, TV, and film, and that sort of led me into the entertainment industry the way I am now. It was my senior year in college that I discovered, or actually one of my professors pointed out, an aptitude for the legal regulatory policy kind of side of the entertainment industry. I was already taking all the graduate level classes in the program, and she said, you're doing the better than any of the graduate students, so maybe you should think about going to law school. To which I laughed hard. I was going to go to film school and be a director, all those things.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get into film school, but I did. I applied to law school and I got in, and I ended up taking a year off, but came back into law school after was working in the television industry. The Writers Guild had gone on strike, and that meant nobody was working. So I went to law school, and so that's how I became an entertainment lawyer.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah,
it's like life just pulls you along, and then all of a sudden you had twists and turns, and it just happened.
It's interesting. As I look back on my life, I'm getting to a point where I feel like an old man when I say that, but I look back on my life and I realized that, every sort of decision and choice, I mentioned photography and video and audio and all those things earlier. Well, now, as the podcast lawyer, I am combining all of those things. I do audio and video and podcast and photography as part of the way I market my business and myself as a lawyer and a educator, content creator. So all those hobbies and things that I've learned over the years, I've brought together into a messy and tangled lump of stuff, but it's fun and it keeps me excited. So
that's fantastic. That's so cool. I'm going to dovetail from my little list of questions out of curiosity. I am not I used to work in media production with my dad and my brother. And my dad was an actor, writer, director.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was the smart one. He was a video editor, graphic artist, and audio engineer. And I was more the production manager, production coordinator person. And he also taught filmmaking, voiceover, screenwriting, all that kind of stuff. And so we were kind of like a team.
Yeah.
We worked together on many different things, and then he sadly passed away in 2011, and so we um, kind of circled the wagons and
Yeah.
decided to take care of my mom who had health issues and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but I kind of get back into media by doing a podcast and
Sure.
working at doing a book and stuff like that. Um, but I was wondering more of the you sound like you're much more technically apt. Like working with sound, my brother was an audio engineer as
Yeah.
well. So, and I grew up in the studio, so I understand
Sure.
how things work. I just don't know how to press the buttons. So I think that's a really cool thing, and so I was thrilled to be able to talk to you, another media professional.
Yeah.
And do you find that there's any overlap between like the audio and video technology know-how to understanding legalese and precepts and principles and so forth? Does it help with your learning to figure that out, or is it just like you just you just are this wonderful prism and you have all these facets to you and they shine brilliantly?
Well, I like that latter characterization, but I'll tell you, I think that there are a lot of, if not similarities in the two businesses. There are similarities in the traits that make one good at this, and that is that, I love to tinker. That's why I'm comfortable with connecting up soundboards and equipment and things like that, and watching a signal get from one place to another. That's sort of a linear kind of a thinking in some ways. And that's something that's very helpful for the lawyering part of me. Thinking linearly about how to get to the goal I'm seeking. But I also have to be creative and make sure that in the case of the audio, the theater, the experience is telling a story or sharing some kind of a message, and finding creative ways to do that. And that also translates into the legal side, where if we're looking to make a contract, we want to make it work for everybody, but we want to, protect my client's interests, and finding creative ways to do it. It's a different kind of exercise. Look, exercise is exercise, but sometimes you're working the arms and sometimes you're working the legs. And so here you're using the brain to do more storytelling, artistic stuff, or more practical, linear stuff. But it's all connected.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to my list of questions here. You kind of talked about what your learning pursuits are
Mm-hmm.
Professionally, but I know you're a pretty busy man, but do you have time to do any private learning pursuits or endeavors?
Well, I've always sort of been one to devote my energies to the things that I'm interested in, that excite me. Sort of follow my nose and into my, like I said, my hobbies, my avocations, those kinds of things. But at the same time, I then try to find ways to, channel that into helping my business, or being, like, hey, I love doing audio. I would have done a podcast whether or not it was going to be good for business. But as it turns out, it's been a really good way to position myself as an expert in my field, because I'm podcasting about this area that I know, and offering ways to help my clients. So yeah, it's all connected. But yeah, I'm always indulging my curiosity about things. And my wife is the same, and so that's one of the things that we have in common. We'll be sitting and talking about something, and one or the other of us will grab our phone and look something up, and then that'll take the conversation, usually with the kids, down a path. Yesterday, as an example, did you know that the people who make the Stanley Cup and the people who make the Stanley brand of tools are not the same company?
Oh,
They were invented by the same person, but the two companies split off about 100 years ago.
oh, that's fascinating.
That's the kind of thing we just learned last night, because I looked at it, I thought, well, it seems obvious that they're both the same company. And then as we were doing it, my wife was actually, I said something and she was being skeptical and said, I'm not sure you're right about that, guy. So she went and looked
Oh,
it up, and it turned out we were sort of both right. And
oh,
what that led to, interestingly, was a discussion about the brand, the trademark for Stanley, being
ah,
divided into two classes and each owned by separate companies. And that's how they sort of coexist in the marketplace, which
fascinating.
now is something I will use in my teaching and training about trademarks. So there you go. Everything sort of
Yeah,
comes full circle.
everything it connects.
Yeah,
I'm also someone who follows her curiosity, so that really resonated with me. I'm like,
sure.
yes. It's like I go off on rabbit trails periodically, and I'm like, oh, and about 6 months to 2 years down the road, it comes helpful for somebody or myself or something.
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
yeah, a lot of people talk about being a lifelong learner, and I
mhm,
think that that's what sort of keeps you interested and excited about life, and probably contributes to longevity is just being curious and indulging that and asking questions and not just sort of accepting, oh, that's the way it is, who cares what the real reason behind it is or whatever
yeah,
else. And thank God for the internet, because it's gotten so easy to go look something up and often go down a rabbit hole and lose track of time and whatever else. But I remember as a kid sitting at the dinner table, if one of the kids came up with a question or something, dad would usually say, go get the dictionary, or go get the
yeah.
encyclopedia. And the dictionary, remember that big old Random House dictionary that was about 7 inches thick and
We have
giant?
one.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I think everybody had one in those days.
Yeah,
And nowadays it's called Wikipedia.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, yeah, I just find it fun to sort of explore how things are and why they are.
yeah. One of the things is, just a tangential thought
Sure.
is I really appreciated your podcast and also your email newsletter,
Mm,
and you share what's going on in the industry, what's really happening, and dispelling myth, and
mhm.
giving people the real truth of what you can and can't do on a national scale.
Sure.
Localities have other things that they got to
Sure.
deal with, but for someone who's like, chicken wire podcaster like myself,
Mhm.
um, putting them together themselves, I would highly recommend subscribing to your newsletter. But how would they? What was some tips and uh, helpful advice? Is like how to discern what's really true and what's not appropriate. You know, because law is so intricate. It's like a patchwork of case law and
Right.
statutes and all this kind of stuff, and then it goes from the international all the way down to the local district.
Hmm.
So it's very confusing for
Yeah.
people. How would you, like, if they can't hire somebody to, like you perhaps,
Hmm.
and they just need to check something to make sure that they're not, doing the wrong thing. What are some resources that you found in your own journey that's helpful for lay people to kind of know what's true? Because there's a lot of misinformation
Yeah.
online.
Sure.
It's like,
Yeah.
Wikipedia is really great, but it's not the most reliable. Everybody always talks
Hmm.
about, check your sources and,
Right.
primary something and,
Hmm.
secondary sources. And I don't
Sure.
remember what the other one was, but I have friends who do research papers and stuff. They know all that stuff.
Yeah.
But for those of us who don't,
Sure.
never finish college, what are some things you would recommend? How does it, it's like, I'll let you answer that.
Well, I'll tell you, that is such a broad question that's very hard
Yeah,
to answer
yeah,
in a comprehensive way that's meaningful. But what I'll say is, I think the most important resource that we all have at our disposal is our common sense. Now, there's a saying that common sense isn't really all that common, but skepticism and that nagging feeling or that sense that, oh, I'm not exactly sure, it sounds right, but something, I think we should pay attention to that. I think a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people are looking for the answer to a question that confirms what they already think or believe,
mm,
rather than what is actually the true thing. So I think we have to learn to suspend that confirmation bias, and being aware of it is the first step to that. So that's an internal thing. I do think that you talked about types of sources, and I'm not an expert in this exactly, but there are primary sources. For example, if you want to know what the rule is in a particular kind of case that the Supreme Court has decided on things, you read the Supreme Court's opinion on that case. You don't read all this, you don't look at just the summaries, you actually go and read the opinion and find the language and confirm, yes, it says what I think it says, or oh, actually it says something different than what I said. Then there are that's a primary source, and the highest court that has decided on a particular issue is the ultimate primary source. The controlling precedent is the term we use in law. And then there are the lower courts, but sometimes it's just a local district court. Here in Los Angeles, we have a court that makes a decision on something. It's possible that the Florida court would decide differently on it. And we call that in the law, we call that a split of authority. But if the case that I'm looking at is here in California, then the California court's rule is the one we're going to follow until a higher court tells us otherwise. And that's why cases sometimes often go to the Supreme Court, because we need to resolve that split, that different point of view. So that's sort of how the court system operates that stuff. There are lots of secondary sources, and that's where we have to really look at how reliable, how authoritative is that secondary source. If it's written, if it's the kind of thing that shows up in a law library, there are volume upon volume of guides and what we call treatises and other kinds of things that you can rely on pretty thoroughly, because they're doing an analysis of that primary authority, and they're sort of synthesizing what all the different things have said and how it goes. And then there's the lower level secondary sources, which might just be blogs or internet paid sites and things like that. And then there's, of course, even less reliable sources. And I think the news media falls right in there in between those less reliable and the lower level secondary sources. And when you're reading traditional media, I think you really have to inject a dose of skepticism in everything and always ask, what source am I looking at and where are they coming from? And right now, that is a rapidly moving, it's like earthquake. It's just constantly having to adjust your footing, because, this week we had the CBS and Paramount canceled Stephen Colbert's show. And there's a question about whether that's because of political reasons or financial reasons. And, because Paramount is waiting for approval of a merger from the administration. So, and we know that the president doesn't care for Colbert's criticisms of him. So we have to sort of look at that as framing the perspective of what we're exploring. So I think skepticism is the answer.
So let's dovetail into your book a little bit.
Sure.
I apologize. I have not read it. It's on my to-read list.
Oh.
I eventually will get to it someday. I have like 14, now it's 13 books that are in my actively reading list. Mm-hmm. And I have more, sure, list in my Goodreads list and all this kind of stuff.
And let's be really honest, books about the law are not exactly the most exciting imagination capturing titles. So
yeah, but I think it would be a value, just reading your blog and your newsletter, and catching some of your podcasts. I think you really are an authoritative source for understanding things. Mm-hmm. And you come from the creative world, so you understand our mindset and how we think and what we deal with and all this. So I thought it would be a really good resource. I'm curious about your learning journey in trying to wrangle together all this information into a book, mm-hmm, organize it all to make sense, make it digestible so people can understand it, mm-hmm, and then your publishing journey and everything. Would you mind sharing, like, what, I'm not an expert, but you are an expert, and for most people to be an expert, they need to write a book. Is that what your journey, or was it like, I want to help this person, or I want to help media people understand this, podcasters understand this, so they don't get taken advantage kind of thing? What was the motivation, and what was your journey like through the process?
Sure. Well, speaking in the context of that skepticism I was talking about a few minutes ago, there are two ways of looking at this, and it's sort of a chicken and an egg scenario. Are you an expert and that's why you write a book, or you wrote a book, that's what makes you an expert? And I think sort of both is my situation. It certainly positions you as an expert having a book. So when I started podcasting as a way of marketing my own practice, I wanted to confirm, as an entertainment lawyer, I'd already been practicing entertainment law for 10 or 12, well, more than that, probably 15 years or so. I had already been practicing law, and so I went to do some due diligence just to make sure I wasn't going to get myself into some hot water or something like that with this podcast thing I was doing. And so I set about to sort of identify the areas where podcasting is different and the law needs to be addressed, or really just the areas that need to be paid, we need to pay attention to. And in the course of doing that, I came up with all these notes and ideas and an outline and organizational structure. And I'll honestly, I think that's one of my superpowers, is the ability to absorb, organize, synthesize, and repeat information in a way that is easy to digest. So that's what I did. I ended up scratching my own itch to answer my own questions. And then that led me to the idea to write this book, because there were no other resources on the subject. So again, it's sort of me trying to help the community and say, look, here are the things that we as creators need to know and understand about this kind of thing that we're doing. If you're doing a show where you talk about other people, hey, there's a possibility of defamation or invasion of privacy or things like that. If you want to use a piece of music or a clip in your show, you better be thinking about the copyright. If you've got a show with a distinctive brand and title, you want to protect that with a trademark. And so that's the sort of kind of stuff that I got into with writing the book. And it was really just to sort of, like I said, scratch my own itch, but also to help the community. And fortunately for me, that has turned into something that positioned me as what I now call myself, the podcast lawyer. The branding came from just diving in head first into this area and becoming known as the guy. Now, I have some competition in the marketplace now, but I'm the podcast lawyer. All the rest of them are other podcast lawyers. So here we are.
That's cool. I really appreciate that. Did you self-publish, or did you go with a traditional publisher? What worked for you?
So I decided just to self-publish it, partly because I was in a hurry to get it out. At the time that I wrote it, I was getting ready to attend what was then called New Media Expo, part of a conference called Blog World that no longer exists. And I was going to release it at the conference, and I didn't want to wait a year for a publisher to decide that everything was right and to do all the editorial stuff. And also it is a fairly short book. It's about 100 pages, so it's a quick read. And so I decided I would just offer it for sale myself, and it's an ebook, so that's pretty easy to do. And at the time, some of the barriers that now exist in the ebook world didn't exist, so I was able to just do it. And it's available now. It's called the Podcast Blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide.
We will definitely put a link for it in the show description.
Yeah, that's podcastlawbook.com. So very easy. And so that's just a site that I control, and that means I get to keep the money when it comes in. I don't have to share it with a publisher or anybody else. So
nice.
And honestly, that's a good just sort of introduction to my world. Everybody who buys the book ends up on my mailing list and hears about all my podcasts and things. And hopefully when they need someone, they can hire me.
That's right. That's really good. So I'm going to go back to my list of questions here. It's okay if we don't get through all of this. It's kind of like a roadmap for me. It's like I try to ask the things that seemed appropriate at the moment. What have you learned that gives you meaning?
That's a really interesting question. I think that as part of my own learning journey, learning about myself, learning what makes me tick, what scares me, what frightens me, what inspires and electrifies me, has made me a better person. It's made me, frankly, more palatable to be around. I got married fairly late. I was already I guess I was late 30s, 39 before I got married. My wife and I joke that we waited, and we skipped the lousy first marriage and waited and found the right person and got married. Nice. But I don't think that could have happened if I hadn't done this learning journey of experiencing some hard knocks and having some grief that I had to process after my father passed away, and doing some psychotherapy. All of those things really helped me become sort of comfortable in my own skin and not feeling like I had to project this something different to the world than who I really am. I mean, we all do that to a certain extent. There's a professional persona, and then there's the sort of, my kids don't see me as the professional, but for the most part, what you see is what you get. And that has made it possible for me to have meaningful relationships with, my now spouse and my kids, but also the community and my clients and colleagues and friends. And so I think that journey of self-discovery is really the thing that has created the most meaning for my life. It's allowed me to achieve a lot of my goals and aspirations and the things that really make me tick.
Yeah, I spent about a few years trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I spent about 10 years doing caregiving for my mom, and then I got like, what am I going to do with in the next 10, 20 years of my life? And I went to a whole, like, figure out more about myself, figure out my niche, that whole thing, and figure out your branding and all that. But a lot of that had figure out who you are kind of elements in it, which were very helpful. I'm just curious, what resources or personality tests or books or whatever did you find helpful in your journey learning about yourself?
Now, before I answer that, I want to address what you were saying just for a second, because I think that it's something that we all do. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? What do I want to be when I grow up? Those kinds of questions. I think that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on us, because the rest of our life is a really long time. At least we hope it's a really long time.
Yeah.
And the fact of it is, we are all growing and evolving and changing, and the experiences we have influence our thinking. And so I think the better question is, what do I want to be doing right now so I can feel present and excited about what's going on? And where is that taking me next? And whether that next is 2 days down the line or 2 months or 2 years or 2 decades doesn't really matter, because, and I'm not saying we just let the wind blow us wherever we're going. It makes sense to grab a hold of the rudder and steer the boat, but maybe finding that little side quest is actually going to change our life in a more meaningful way than just staying on course, right? So I think we should let the pressure off a little bit to decide the whole long future ahead of us, and focus on the now and the immediate future, and making sure that it's a fulfilling experience as we enjoy the journey, right? So
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I don't always hear a lot of that counterpoints.
Yeah. I mean, look, parents, everybody who cares about us wants us to be safe and secure. And that often means having a plan. But what if your plan is to just enjoy the moment and see where that takes us? I think that's an okay thing to do. And I haven't done it the way I described it just now. I kind of sometimes wish I had. And look, as you get older and you put down roots and you have family, you have responsibilities that dictate, no, you actually do need to be thinking longer term. But, like it started with follow my nose, where it took me in terms of my hobbies and things that I wanted to be involved in. And that's the way I've always sort of lived my life. So anyway,
cool.
Now to answer,
I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure. So your question was, what resources to help me on that journey that we're talking about? I tell you, I have never been one to read a lot of self-help books and things like that. I've listened to some podcasts about, human dynamics and psychology and things like that, but that's all fairly recent. Podcasting is a relatively young medium. I think earlier on, I got a lot from doing some talk therapy with a psychologist, a couple of different psychologists who really sort of helped me sort of frame the questions I should be asking myself and that kind of thing. But then in terms of sort of in the personal development journey as regards my business, there have been a few great books. One is called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, which really talks about sort of finding your zone of genius and ridding yourself as much as possible of all the things that aren't your zone of genius by delegating and hiring associates and people to work on the things that you're not good at or you don't like doing, right? What other great resources are there? Anthony Robbins, Awaken the Journey, Awaken the Giant Within, those kinds of, self-help books about personal empowerment, those kinds of things. I followed for a while another self-help or self-actualization guy named Brendan Burchard, who has a lot of good things to say, and sort of follow them for a while and get what I need, and then move on to the next one. And I haven't looked at what Brendan's put out in a long time, but I think that gurus are gurus of the moment, at least for me. As my perspective changes, their position changes.
Yeah, I can resonate with that.
Sure.
I kind of get into somebody and I watch their YouTube videos, and kind of read a bunch of their blogs or newsletters and stuff,
Sure.
and then I'm like, I've heard it, and they start repeating the same thing. You're like, okay, I'm onto something new.
Well, sometimes the repetition is important, so it sinks in.
Is. But that's true. Yeah, but what problems have you dealt with successfully, and how did you solve them?
Well, I think we talked about some of those already. Sort of getting a handle on who I am has definitely been, I wouldn't say it was a problem, but it was definitely a challenge that needed to be addressed in order to become who I wanted to be. Other things, look, I think we all struggle with self-doubt from time to time. I haven't really been one to suffer from what people refer to as imposter syndrome, but there's always that worry about, am I good enough? Do I deserve? Why should they follow me? What is it? What do I bring to the table that adds real value? All those questions are sort of there nagging at me every time I put out any content or do anything. And part of it is just sort of acknowledging I wouldn't have made it this far in life if not for some skill, ability, aptitude, and insight, wisdom that come into play. And so the way I've overcome a lot of those doubts is just to remind myself, hey, you've helped a lot of people. People thank you for that. I actually have, this is a little tip. I have a little file on my computer, just a folder, where anytime somebody sends me an email or a message that is sort of positive and congratulatory or encouraging, I put it, the file's called kudos, and I just put stuff in there. And occasionally I just go in, and especially when I'm feeling kind of low, I go in there and I read the things that people have said to me about me. Because, we're so quick to read criticism and let the criticism stay with us. But we're trained not to brag, not to boast, not to be influenced too much by, don't let it go to your head, right? But what do? The criticism, sure, we let it go to our head. And frankly, the way most of us grew up is mom and dad, yes, of course, they were supportive, and you can be anything you want to be, and you're so beautiful, and that's a great piece of artwork. We're going to hang it on the refrigerator door, but you didn't do the dishes, and you're wearing that to, those kinds of criticisms. Those are the things that linger and stick with us and become part of our operating system, right? So it's important to counter that with the positive stuff that we mostly don't retain in the same way. And that's been a big help for me. Other things that I've overcome. Well, I think that ADHD, that undiagnosed ADHD that I mentioned earlier, I think that's been something I've had to develop my own mechanisms to cope with. And some of that has been setting the environment such that I can focus and concentrate, so that I don't have a lot of distractions. I'll tell you that since I've been working from home office for a long time, but I've got kids on the other side of the door right here, and the laundry's going and the dogs are barking, and fortunately I don't think you can hear most of that.
No, I can't hear it at all.
But those kinds of distractions are with me sort of all day, every day. So I've gotten better at managing my discipline and focus. And yet I've also embraced the desire to be in this kind of an environment, so that I'm here and home at dinner time with my family every night. And I can see the kids grow up, rather than, wondering, oh, where did all the time go? What happened to the 10th year and the 12th year? Those kinds of things. So that's a choice that I've made that I think has allowed me to, if not be a great dad, at least a reasonably good dad.
Yeah,
so,
that's cool.
Yeah. And yeah, that wasn't exactly a challenge that I had to overcome, but the self-doubt, the worry, And I think I sometimes, maybe there's a little bit of, I don't want to, I don't want to steal not to steal the thunder. That's not the right term, but there are some folks that are on the autism spectrum. I don't want to put myself there and
Right.
undermine what that means for people, because it's a tremendous um, weight to carry for a lot of people. But I do think that I sometimes miss social cues, and I'm maybe not that great at reading the room every time. And sometimes I'll say things that I should have thought twice about, those kind of things. And I've gotten better at that as I've sort of become a little more self-aware, I guess I'd say.
Yeah. I have vision and hearing. I'm not wearing my glasses right now, but when I was a kid, I used to have Coke bottle glasses, and I was extremely nearsighted, and I have a hearing loss. And my mom, my brother, and I all have vision and hearing loss issues. So I understand missing social cues and missing understanding. Like my mom does not understand subtext or subtlety at all. She
Oh,
just
interesting.
literally can't hear it.
Yeah.
And so we have to explain things to her and stuff. But she's smart as a tack, doesn't
Sure.
mean you're stupid,
Right.
So I don't want people feeling like just because they missed something because of a
Right.
handicap or a physical challenge or mental,
Yeah. And that's the thing, is when you
thing.
have
It's
those
like,
actual handicaps, why I was sort of being hemming and hawing around the issue was,
sure,
I don't consider that I have those handicaps that a lot of people are burdened with, or that
right,
however, and look, for them, when you have to expend so much energy just to get the primary meaning of the words, hear
right,
what the actual words that were said,
right,
picking up on subtext is another investment of energy that you may not have left at the time.
right.
For me, it's just sort of a what's the word? Just sort of a absence of, just forgetfulness that, there
Mm.
is subtext, sometimes.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So let me take a look at my questions here.
sure.
Let's see here. You've you've been so wonderful. I appreciate your time.
Oh,
Let's see here. You've answered some of these questions you've already sort of answered.
hmm
So I'm trying to something. Let's go into the teaching a little bit, if that would
sure.
be okay.
Yeah.
For you, for learning and also teaching,
Mhm.
do you prefer self-study or classes more? And or
The
is it a
answer is
mix?
yes.
Okay.
Really, both. I mean, I
Okay.
think that um, there is value in the structure and the organization of the traditional class environment. Although, again, for many people, it may be hard to navigate the distraction, the fact that there's other people around, the pace of things. Like I was saying, as a kid, I was feeling like I was waiting for the other class members just to catch up on things. So that's the downside. But the upside is that there's somebody there to help you in the moment, and who has hopefully thought through how to present the material in the most digestible, absorbable way, and who can pick up on, hopefully, the cues that maybe you're not getting at, those kinds of things. The self-teaching is the other side of the coin, and I think they go together, and that's why we have homework in a lot of classes. Although I guess there's a trend in schools now to assign less and less homework, because, well, at least in the primary schooling, they're getting away. At least my kids' teachers have sort of gotten away from too much homework,
Interesting.
because they recognize also the need for the downtime and the recharging and things like that. So
Mm.
if you're at school for 6 or 8 hours a day, that's a lot. To have then another 4 or 5 hours of stuff to do at night is, it leaves no time for the rest of what makes us a whole person. But if you're not in school, you can still round yourself out by doing the self-teaching, reading stuff that's interesting, finding a subject and pursuing it, chasing it down. I think that not having the assignment of, write me a 12-page paper about this, is something that you have to then have the discipline to want to do that anyway, or at least to answer the same questions that you would if you wrote the paper. And I think it's interesting. My wife, who, we're in our 50s, she is late 50s. She is starting a new school program. She's working on a master's degree in microbiology. Classes don't start
Wow.
for a few more weeks, but she's already read 2 whole sort of textbooks on the subject, and she's got probably 1,000 index cards of notes that she's taken.
Thanks.
Just to self-teach, to get herself sort of ready to be, again, at the front of the class rather than the back of the class, to learn stuff as she gets there. Maybe some of that is coming from a worry that she's not up to it yet because she's been out of school for a while, those kind of things. But I think some of it is just that she enjoys it and likes to sort of challenge herself to learn the stuff well.
Cool.
So, again, that's self-teaching. She just picked out some books and went for it.
Yeah, cool. I just recently turned 50 back in June. And so for me, it's like, I'm the same person, but I'm different. This is weird. And, but I really applaud your wife in pursuing that. That's fantastic. I have two friends who, one pursued her PhD about 10 years ago, and the other one finished her seminary degree, Master of Divinity. I think, I don't remember all the seminary degrees and stuff, but so it's like I have a huge amount of respect for them. I don't think I can do it because I'm like, I like self-study. I like going to classes periodically, but I like having to be able to do things at my own pace and read through the book, take lots of notes, remember half of it, or a third, or a quarter. Right now I'm part of an organization called the SCA, which is the Society of Creative Anachronism, which does medieval reenactment.
I was going to say, it goes back to the Middle Ages, doesn't it?
Yeah. They do a lot of historical medieval recreation. They have arts and sciences and heavy fighting and martial arts and rapier fighting, which is the predecessor to fencing. And it's basically it's cosplay for medieval enthusiasts.
Okay.
But some people get really into the history. They really love the history. I just like it because there's a whole bunch of learners who have 300 hobbies under one umbrella. I'm like, this is cool.
Well, and when you think about it, the Middle Ages, the Enlightenment period was a time. I mean, the reason it was called the Enlightenment was it was a time of great learning and study and shedding light on new things and science and So that's amazing. That's really.
So I'm slowly reading medieval education books. And this current one is about disputations, which is the art of debating.
Yeah.
Both in written form and in or talking.
Sure.
I can't say all the fancy words sometimes.
So what's that, 14th, 15th century era?
Yeah.
Or a little later. Okay.
It was somewhere, it kind of started like 1400s, and then I'm slowly reading through the chapters, and I'm just getting to Aslam, which was a church father who did a bunch of stuff that I don't know very much, but here in Colorado we have a Islam Society, which is very much about thinking. It's very rabbit room oriented, which is basically arts and literature and thinking things through, kind of like a salons of past. So it's kind of that kind of it's all Christian, but it's welcome to people who are not believers. It's just has a nice culture to it. It's been down in the Springs. I don't get down there very much anymore. But it's like, so I'm like, I know this from this group.
Sure. Well, if you don't mind, I'll make a little suggestion. This is me as the lawyer now, of course, but if you find that this art of disputation is something that you're interested in, it may be worth going and having a look at the Federalist Papers, which is the written back and forth debate between Alexander Hamilton and James Madison at the time of the founding of the U.S. and the arguments about what form of government we were going to have and some of the meanings of the things that we were putting into the Constitution and how the system, the world sort of evolved. It's very telling to see that there were points of view, but it's not just this is the way it is. They had points of view about how it should be. and then you can sort of look at what's become of it. And I think
I've
in the current
heard
political climate, yeah,
I've heard of Federalist Papers, but I never knew what they were.
yeah,
So I
it's a series
appreciate
of
you telling
letters
me because
back and forth.
I love history. I'm just not very good at remembering dates and
Sure,
details. I just find it so fascinating that people just did a whole bunch of stuff, and
right,
and it's a it's like you know it's a really cool thing. So
yeah,
thank you very much for the
sure,
recommendation. I will put that on my to read list someday.
okay,
That'll be kind of cool.
right after my book.
Yes, after your book. Yes. Because I do need to read that because I am doing a
I,
podcast and I need to learn how to do this. I did sign up for your newsletter because you
cool,
had that wonderful thing where you, at the time, you were saying if you could have a free download for um, release form,
yeah,
podcast release form. And I'm like, you were the most solid one. I'm looking online for
hmm
different ones and I'm like, his just is like rock solid. I put a couple little tweaks in there for myself,
sure,
which may, it's probably okay. I wanted to include being able to use quotes and things
yeah.
for future books as well.
I definitely
And
recognized my work in your release form, so
oh,
thank you for
good. I'm glad. I hope you would find that encouraging because I
yeah,
was like,
absolutely.
that was really great. And I'm like, this is cool. And I'm slowly trying to figure out my logo and
Mhm.
all that because I'm only on YouTube at the moment when this was recorded. I'm thinking maybe to do Substack and or Spotify in the future.
Oh, great.
Um, but you need a logo, and I have no logo, and and I have some friends who are willing to work with me, but I'm like trying to figure out what to do with Nara
Sure.
Fellowship. I like the deer that I have on my
Mhm.
but it's a stock photo, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but Nara Fellowship is a little off the beaten path. Most people are like, the what? I'm like, Nara Fellowship. It's and so
Yeah.
I'm like trying to figure out should I go with a tree instead because it means oak? Should I like the deer because it's aesthetics reasons,
Mhm.
but I'm still figuring all that stuff out. So for me, I'm just like, I'm trying to figure this out. How do I set this up? You know, but
Well, it's interesting. I had the great pleasure of visiting Japan
oh,
about 25 years ago. A friend of mine was working over there for the year, and I went and visited. And we actually went and visited a town called Nara.
mm,
And it is, as you walk through the town, there are deer everywhere. So it fits, it works.
yep, yep.
It
So
didn't strike me as incongruous at all. So,
okay, that's
yeah.
exactly what I was
I
aiming
mean,
for.
the deer
Because
will walk right up to you.
yeah,
They're that domesticated. It's really pretty cool.
yeah, they're very they're considered sacred in
Yeah.
Japan,
Hmm.
and they're like a sacred animal, like the dove for us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they look slightly different.
Yeah.
So they don't look. They have slightly different shape and coloring.
Yeah. They're not the
Um,
North American white-tailed deer that
right.
we're used to seeing. And yeah.
Yeah, they're very beautiful.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that's really cool. I'm really glad you got to see the Nara and the Nara
Yeah.
deer. So that's really neat. Um, I should probably let you go pretty soon.
Yeah. I think we're
Um,
okay. If you've got a couple more questions, we
a
can do
couple
them.
more
Otherwise,
questions.
I'm.
Um, One of the things that I didn't follow up on was
Mhm.
let's jump back to the teaching.
Yeah.
Um, how did you get into that, and what have you found helpful in your learning for learning how to teach?
Hmm.
And also, what have you found helpful for your students that you kind of figured out how to do?
Great question. One of the things about studying law is that at least a part of being a lawyer is about, or at least part of the training to be a lawyer is about learning how to teach or persuade a jury, right? So you have to be able to come in and again break down difficult concepts into small enough pieces that they can chew on it and make a decision or digest it, and then the next one and the next one. And so I think some of it was built into me there in the law, even though I've never been a court. I mean, I've gone to court a few times, but I'm not a litigation attorney, so that's not my bag. But you learn those skills and you translate them and bring them to other things. How I fell into teaching was sort of interesting. I was already doing a blog, and was I doing video, and I wasn't doing podcasts yet, but maybe I was. But one of my former law professors actually was contacted by the chair of the department at the first college where I taught, Loyola Marymount University, in their business school. And this gal needed someone to teach a course in business law. And oh, by the way, it was starting next week. And he said, "Oh, I know who you should call Gordan." And she called me, and I went for an interview later that day, and was hired the next day, and got the book and learned the material the next day. It was that kind of rapid fire, right? And so for me, for that experience, the learning of the material, my job as a teacher was to just be the leader, the step ahead of where the students were, so I could answer their, knowing the basic legal principles made that easy for me. But the curriculum was already sort of laid out for me. So I was getting up to speed and then teaching them, and then getting up to speed for the next, leapfrogging ahead every week. In the course of doing that, I learned a bit about the pedagogical structuring and style of teaching and that. But I think a lot of it was just sort of, again, being able to break down difficult concepts into linear processes of thinking, and allow people to just sort of get it and digest it and absorb it. And then, of course, the other part of it is, frankly, just being the kind of person the students want to hear from, want to be engaged with, and engaging. That's not a strategy, it's a trick. How do you get these usually people who are 20 or 30 years younger than you to communicate and share? You can call on people, of course, but then that's sort of forcing them. You want them to volunteer to engage in the process. Law school is taught using what's called the Socratic method, which is really, you ask questions that lead the students to give the answer. You assign them to read this case, and then you ask them, okay, break it down. What's this case about? So you're training the student to do the explanation, the learning, and they're teaching the rest of the class at the same time, right? Everybody's done the same reading, and then, okay, what do I have to take away from this? College level teaching uses that less. Yes, you ask questions, but you also are expected to lecture and give them that linear train of thought. But asking questions is the best way to get people thinking and finding their answers, right?
Yeah.
So that was the first teaching gig. And then that same law professor, actually, this is an interesting story. I had started in my practice doing a fair bit of work in the theater, which is my earliest passion. And the law of theater is very different from film and television, just because they evolved at different times and frankly, different centuries. And so there are a number of ways where things branch in one direction or the other. And so learning those differences, again, was what was important. In the course of learning and being able to work in the field of theater law, again, starting to talk with people about it, the same professor, when the law school he was teaching at, wanted to do an online graduate level post lawyer program, and they wanted to teach theater law class. They reached out to me, and I got to create the curriculum. And,
wow, sweet.
I mean, there was already a textbook or a case book for theater law, but there was a lot of other stuff that kind of we worked into the thing. And it was really cool to be able to organize it and structure it and say, here's what you need to know if you're going to be this kind of a lawyer doing these kinds of things. And again, no better way to become an expert than to have to learn it so you can teach it.
Right. That's true. That's really true. Thank you for those. That's really cool. Did you have any thoughts or questions for me?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's learning journey is different. So, I'm interested in knowing a little bit about yours.
Sure.
But no, I think you've done a great job of extracting the stuff.
Sure. I'll go on a little bit of my learning journey. I've always been kind of curious. I always liked history. I used to watch a lot of documentaries, history, PBS kind of stuff with my dad. When he was working on one of his films before he passed away, we watched a lot of Christian documentaries dealing with the supernatural.
Mhm.
trying to understand things from a biblical perspective, from pastors who dealt with what's called deliverance ministries and all that kind of stuff. And so we found that very fascinating. It's spooky as heck, but very fascinating. And um, but he's always been a learner himself, and so we always liked learning as well. Um, I was more into fiction and stuff, and then you know, um, during the latter part of his life, and then into after he passed away, I just kind of switched to like mostly nonfiction and a little bit of fiction periodically. I haven't watched TV for almost 10, 15 years.
Wow.
Um, and I really I love learning about learning different things. Mostly it was more of like self-help stuff.
Mhm.
Um, there was a lot of different tangents of like SCA for me, and I tend to like it because I'm around a bunch of learners, and it's interesting and fun, and I learn stuff from them, and they've spent 5, 10, 20 years in SCA. They have a lot of history knowledge, and they also have a lot of like how to make stained glass, this
Mhm.
kind of stuff. Um, it's kind of fun and interesting. Um, so my learning journeys was regular school. I was part of the hearing handicap program in Colorado at the time. Um, I I always had little rabbit trails I would go on, but I was mostly a fiction kid,
Mhm.
and then when my life became more caregiving and doing stuff, I had a lot of downtime. So I would actually read books and go to different classes with some of my friends who are learners.
Mhm.
And I'm I have a I then I became interested in learning about um, writing, podcasting, building a platform, all that kind of stuff. And then also one of the things that I'm actually learning on, I mean, it's not like scholastic, um, scholarly learning. This is more like rabbit trail. When I find something that deals with humility or fame,
Mm.
I try to read about it, whether it be an article or several books I've read by Christian authors. Um, one was really great by Tim Keller. The Art of Self Forgetfulness.
Oh.
It's a very short little book, but it's very insightful about dealing with really being truly humble. And one of the things is we can get legalistic about it, and we, you know, we, I'm going to be humble, and then we don't be humble because we're trying to be humble.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. It's more of a self forgetfulness. It's not
Sure.
thinking of yourself less. It's thinking of you.
Mhm.
It's thinking. It's not thinking of yourself as less than. It's just thinking of yourself less often, if not as
Yeah.
frequently. And you tend to focus more on the other person, and that's one of the things that he talks about is shyness. Is people are so self-centered and self
Yeah.
you know phobic
Absorb.
about
Yeah.
making the big mistake and stuff.
Mhm.
If they just become more self-forgetful, then they can and they think may focus more on the other person than themselves, then they break through that barrier.
Yeah.
So he has several things of that nature that were very insightful that I thought that was a lot of the other books that I stumbled upon um,
Mhm.
had the usual um, true truisms and stuff, and they seem boring. I'm always chasing the insight somebody has that took them 30 years to figure it out.
Right, right.
So
That's really interesting. I think so much of our lives, we early life, we grow up worried about what mom and dad think, worried about what grandma and grandpa think, worried about what the teacher thinks, worried about what our classmates think of us. And the fact of it is that develops this very keen sense of having to think about self in the sense of how did the rest of the world think of me.
yeah,
But then you get to the point where by the time you're an adult, nobody else has time to think about you. Everybody's worried about themselves.
right.
So they don't care. It
Yep.
doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And getting to grips with that, it allows us to be sort of comfortable in our own skin and to be able to just sort of operate in a, what's best for the world, what's best for other people. And those are the people we think of as sort of, I don't know, more evolved, more, I don't want to use holy, but you know what I'm saying. I don't want to say better either, but just in a
Yeah.
better place
Right.
than most of us. And
Yeah.
so that's something to aspire to, is to let
So
go of that
I have
self.
a lot of different pots, fires in the pan or whatever you
Yeah.
call it. Pots in the
Irons in
pan.
the fire. Yeah.
Irons in the fire. Thank you very much. Um,
Middle Ages
and
blacksmith reference, by the way.
yeah, irons in the fire. And so I kind of do. I was I was thinking a lot about building a platform. How we all want to be rich and famous, and that's probably going to be unlikely. I'll probably never be at your scale of what you have, and that's fine. Um, and I I thought about humility, and I don't see a lot of stuff talking about building a platform and staying humble and centered within yourself while you build your platform. And
Mm,
so that's a book project that I'm currently working on, and it's basically me figuring this out, you know. And
yeah.
and I don't have any great wisdom to share. I'm sharing stuff that I stumbled
Sure.
upon different philosophers and different people who talked about it, and
Yeah.
figuring it out as I go. It's like a verbal processing book. Um, but
That's great.
in the future, I'll publish it or something, and 5 people will buy it. It's
Well, it's interesting as you're talking about building a platform. Presumably, you want to do that. Not, I mean, yes, everybody, like you said, we want to be famous,
yeah,
but the real value that having a platform, having that fame and thing is the ability to serve the others in the world and the community. And so, sooner rather than later, I think the best thing we can do is put aside the self, as you're saying, forget self for a minute and just serve.
right,
Who's this for? How's it going to help them? Can I do more with that? And that serving others will serve yourself.
right,
So,
exactly.
uh, admire that.
My dad had two truisms. That he was a firm believer in helping people,
Hmm.
and he was a very generous person. And and the other one was follow the open door.
Hmm.
He believed in following the open door because you never knew where it was going to lead,
Yeah.
and it would lead to something that was meaningful and what was supposed to happen, kind of thing.
I
Sometimes you don't want to go down the alleyway. That's not what he was talking about.
No, but
But it's like opportunities arise, and you know
yeah,
you got to discern whether to go with them or not. And it's like when to hold them and when to fold them.
it's like that iconic scene in the movies, right, where they come up to this door and the guy's getting ready to ram his shoulder into it, and someone says, "Just hold on," and they walk up and turn the knob and slide it, and
Yeah,
somebody was like,
yeah,
we're so busy trying to figure out how to get over the wall that we forget that, oh, there's a gate or a door.
yeah,
Just use it.
exactly, exactly. I um I have one last question for you, and then we'll wrap up. Um, do you have any last thoughts or words of encouragement for other learners?
Yeah. I think that no matter what your path in life, what you want to do, your goals, I think that it's important to remember that everything is about message, one way or the other, the message you're receiving or the message you're giving, whether it's your marketing, whether it's your relationships, you're communicating your ideas, your thoughts, and um, and so learning how to craft that message and interpret the messages you're receiving is really, really important. But also it's the willingness not just to come up with ideas. How many times have we all sort of said, God, I wish I'd said this to them in that moment or whatever, right? So it's important to speak up, speak your truth, express yourself, be who you are as boldly and vibrantly as possible. And again, if you're willing to forget about what other people think of you, that's when it becomes really, really powerful. Yes, have your message, share your thoughts, your opinions, your viewpoint, whatever, and back it up. Of course, let's have some, real evidence, real proof of what we're saying. Don't just rely on those secondary and tertiary and terrible sources, and certainly not the echo chamber of ideas that just sort of confirm what we want to believe. But don't be shy or timid about putting yourself and your message out there. That would be my most important share.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's been a delight to talk with you and meet
Likewise.
you, and I really appreciate it. Maybe someday we can do it again and go off and something else if we'd like. But thank you for your time
Oh,
and your sharing of yourself with us. And thank you everyone for watching Nora Fellowship, and we'll see you next time.
thanks for having me.